So criticism of T.S. Eliot's essay, which is known as a tradition and the individual talent. Now, if you talk about T.S. Eliot, who is he? Thomas Stern Eliot, one of the most influential literary critics of the 20th century, isn't it? So he wrote an important essay titled "The Tradition and the Individual Talent," in which year? In the year of 1919. So, and he talks about how poets and writers should relate to the literary tradition. Literary tradition, the works of past writers, while also developing their own individual talent, isn't it? So he presents several ideas that have shaped modern literary criticism. Now, if you talk about that, the meaning of tradition in literature, what do you mean by that? The meaning of tradition in literature. Now, Eliot or Thomas Stern Eliot argues that what tradition is not simply following what has been done in the past. Instead, he believes that what tradition is a connection between what? The present and the past. Am I clear? So, a great writer does not ignore the works of earlier poets and does not ignore the works of what others. And instead, the great writers learns from them and contributes to that tradition. In that case, there are certain people who are certain writers who have a misunderstanding of tradition. You can say that many writers think that tradition means blindly copying old works. But Eliot disagrees to this. So he believes what tradition is about knowing. Tradition is about understanding past literature deeply. Third is called as a new writer should study older works carefully and see how literature has changed over time. Like you find out that in exams, most of the students write what they have read and what they have understood, and they write their own ideas. So whatever have been written by the writers, they don't copy the same. What they start doing, what they do, that they simply read those of the things and try to contribute the past into present in their own way, isn't it? So, but there are students who copy and without even checking that what I have been written, isn't it? So that is what the author wanted to point out. A new writer should study older works carefully and see how literature has changed over time. That is what called as it indicates what? A misunderstanding of tradition. So people copy, people without even understand, people means without even know, right, that reality or the truth. So those are nothing but called as a misunderstanding of tradition. Second is called as a historical sense. When we say that historical sense, T.S. Eliot says that a good poet should have a historical sense. When I say that historical sense, it means they should understand how past literature connects to the present. Second, when a new poet writes, their work should not be seen as a completely separate from past literature, but as a continuation of it. Right? So, continuation of it. Let's talk about some examples. Imagine you want to be a great singer. If you only focus on creating new songs, right, without studying classical music or past great musics, so what you will do? You brought nothing but the important lessons, or means you can say that you might miss important lessons. So T.S. Eliot believes the same is true for poetry, isn't it? So in that case, he believes that what one must have what learning the great lessons, right? great poems. So, so that one could continue the tradition, isn't it? Second, we understand about the tradition. Second, it's called the role of individual talent. When we say that, because the topic is what? Tradition and the individual talent. When we talk about the role of individual talent, although Eliot or T.S. Eliot values tradition, what did he do actually? He also believes that a poet should bring something new to literature, isn't it? It means you shall not continue the tradition, you also bring something new. Get my point? So, however, this should not based only on emotion or called as a personal experiences. Instead, poetry should be an intellectual. Poetry should be an intellectual and a creative process. So when we say that intellectual, it means where your knowledge uh, and also your creative process matters, isn't it? So poetry is not just about personal feelings. Poetry is not just about personal feelings. Many poets do what they write about their emotion. Many poets also means, go beyond this. So Eliot says that what a poet, so who goes beyond to this, is the actual poet, right? So who has not only focus only on emotion, but also focus what the society or what happens in the society, isn't it? So a good poet takes emotions, personal experiences, and transforms them, changes them into something which is a universal, like I said, which happens in society or which happens in the universe, isn't it? So the poet stated also impersonal theory of poetry. What is that impersonal? Something which is not personal. Personal theory of poetry. When we say that the T.S. Eliot says that poetry should be impersonal, this means that a poet should not write just to express his or her own feelings. So instead, when a poet should use his experiences or her experiences, emotions, and intelligence to create something that connects with all readers. So whoever reads it, so he or she finds out it implies to my life, right? And not just the poet who writes his own personal things. So let's talk about it. Think of a chef. Think of a chef who is cooking a dish, and you find out that a great chef does not just throw ingredients together randomly based on their mood. So instead, what means a great chef uses his or her knowledge of different flavors, different tastes, so techniques and the past recipes to create a balanced and a delicious meal, so that means others could feel or others could find the taste, isn't it? A poet should do the same with the words, with the ideas, and with the emotion. Did you ever go to any of the hotel or restaurant? You would find out that whatever your taste you ask, and he prepares it. It's not because of the chef's mood. It's because of the reader's mood or uh, people who sit there for eating, right? Taking food. So the poet also said that T.S. Eliot also said that what the poet as a catalyst. When we say that catalyst, it means chemical reaction theory. Catalyst, something that affected and destroyed, isn't it? So T.S. Eliot uses an interesting scientific comparison to explain his idea by saying that what he says that a poet is like a catalyst in a chemical reaction, right? So in which what happened means a catalyst is just something or someone that speeds up chemical reaction without being changed itself. And Eliot says that a poet plays the same, a similar role in poetry. So what does the poet do? The poet also speed up in something and changed without being changed itself. He or she tries to change the whole universe. So then the poet also says that how does this chemical reaction theory relate to poetry? Because when a poet writes, so he or she or his or her personal feelings and experiences get transformed or changed into what a poetry. But the poet should not become the focus of the point, right? The poet should not become the focus of the point, because he is not the important one. So what he is writing, what is a personal feeling and experience changed into poetry is important, isn't it? The poet is like a scientist. So how? Because mixing chemicals to create something new, but means they do not add their personal emotion directly into the final product. So that is what. Let's talk about an imagine a filmmaker, right, who prepares a movie or who makes a movie. So what does he do? The movie is not just about the filmmaker's life, but it is shaped by Nelson, his or her knowledge, so creativity and influences from other films, isn't it? Similarly, a poet should not just write about personal emotions, but should shape him or her into something artistic and universal, right? Then we talk about, when we say traditional and individual talent, we stated about the relationship between past and present, isn't it? So past and present what? Past and present writers. So they're writing. So T.S. Eliot believes that when a new poet creates something valuable, so it does not only change the present, but also affects how we view uh, the works, the past works of the writer, isn't it? So means, like before Shakespeare, you would find out people wrote plays differently. Before Shakespeare, people wrote plays differently. But after Shakespeare's works, what happened? Means earlier plays were seen in a new way because he set new standards. You would find out that most people say that William Shakespeare's writing is complex. Writing is called as a very difficult to infer or interpret. So that indicates, means, what kind of a writer he is, right? So, and comparing him with the other writers, we find out he is nothing but the most popular. Similarly, when a great poet writes something new, it changes how we see past literature, because your writing resembles the writing of other writers of the past. So, this means that literature is nothing but a living tradition. We can consider literature is a what? Living tradition where old and new works are connected. So the next stage called as when we talk about ideas of Eliot and evaluation of Eliot's ideas. So when we say Eliot's ideas means what? The criticism of his essay. Criticism of his essay. That is called as a tradition and individual talent. So Eliot ideas were nothing but influential. Influential means that influence to the other writers. Some critics disagree with him. So, like you can say, means Eliot's ideas, if you evaluate that, you would find out his ideas were nothing but a too much focus on tradition. Too much focus on tradition. So you can also say the impersonal theory, which unrealistic, the impersonal theory. So, and you would also that poetry he takes as a form of social expression, and you can talk about that. All these three things, which are clearly found out in a T.S. Eliot. Some people think what Eliot puts too much importance on past literature and doesn't give enough value to fresh and original ideas. Second, it's called as not all great writers follow tradition. So you may follow the tradition, but not all great writers follow tradition. Some completely break away. Some completely break away the tradition that the past writers follow and still create masterpieces, isn't it? So it is not mandatory that what means we need to follow tradition and then only we will be able to create masterpieces, isn't it? So second is called the impersonal theory, which is unrealistic. So impersonal theory means what? many believe that poetry is deeply personal. Many believe that poetry is nothing but involved with your own experience. So, and that writers cannot separate their emotions from their work. So, Eliot says poets should not put the personal feelings uh, directly into poetry. So, but some critics argue that the best poetry often comes from deep personal experiences. Now, understand the two different viewpoints, two different thoughts, right? One is T.S. Eliot, and the other one is called as the other writers or other poets, right? So, and according to T.S. Eliot, what poetry as a form of social expression, poetry as a form of social expressions. So some critics say that what poetry should also reflect social and a political expression or issues, right? So not just tradition and impersonal creativity. It should also create nothing but some kind of revolution, right? Revolution in a social and political part. Are you getting my point? So, and finally, why we consider that T.S. Eliot's issue essay, which is called as a tradition and individual, important because despite criticism, Eliot essay, tradition and the individual talent remains one of the important works in what literary criticism. It changed how people view poetry and the role of poets. His ideas generally encourage what writers to respect literary history while also developing their own unique style, isn't it? So, and Eliot teaches us that. Eliot teaches us that what great art is nothing but a balance. Great art is nothing but a balance between learning from the past and creating something new. So just like a tree that needs strong roots to grow tall, a poet needs strong knowledge of tradition to develop their own what talent, isn't it? So that's what you would find out. In this particular part. So you can say that his essay is like a bridge. Bridge, you understand? That connect one part to the other part. Bridge between tradition and creativity. So it reminds writers that what understanding the past does not mean copying it. Understanding the past doesn't mean copying it, but rather learning from it to create something meaningful for the future. Is it?